I always thought love was simple, steady. You meet someone, you build a life, and you settle into the rhythm of it. Mark and I had that once. Or maybe I convinced myself we did. 8 years of marriage, the house we picked together, and Max, our golden retriever. He came into our lives as a wedding gift from Mark's sister, a little ball of fluff that grew into a quiet guardian. Max was constant in ways Mark never was. Mark used to laugh more. He'd reach for my hand while driving, or dance with me in the kitchen when we had nowhere to be. But over time, his touch grew colder. His eyes drifted when I spoke. He wasn't cruel, at least not in the way you'd expect, but absence has a sharpness of its own. He was always gone. "Work's crazy," he'd say. "Another late meeting." I believed him, because I wanted to, because admitting the truth meant something was broken. Max knew before I did. He always did. On nights I stayed up waiting, Max would sit by the door with me. His ears would perk up at every passing car, tail twitching with anticipation, only to droop when Mark didn't show. I'd curl up on the couch with him, whispering things I couldn't say aloud. I didn't want to seem paranoid, desperate. But I was both. When you love someone who's slipping away, you look for clues in the silence. I found the first one by accident. A perfume I didn't wear. It clung to his collar, floral and sweet. I joked, lightly, nervously, but Mark shrugged it off. Must be someone from the office. I wanted to believe that. But when the receipts started showing up in his coat pockets, dinners for two, bars we'd never been to, I stopped asking. The answers scared me more than the questions. Max started sleeping in bed with me after that. He'd curl up close, pressing his back against mine, like he could hold all the broken pieces together. He'd nudge me gently if I cried, or rest his head in my lap when I stared off too long. There's a loyalty in dogs that cuts deeper than most people realize. Max wasn't just a pet. He was the only one still listening. I remember the way Mark looked at me started to change. It wasn't hate. It was worse, indifference. Like I was furniture in a house he couldn't wait to leave. He'd scroll through his phone at dinner. Leave mid-conversation. His smile, the one that used to be mine, became something he wore for strangers. The man I married was still there in pieces, but he never looked at me the same. The distance wasn't just emotional. He started working later, coming home past midnight, and then barely at all. When I questioned him, his temper flared. "Why are you always so suspicious?" he snapped one night. "You're imagining things." That's when I started questioning myself. Maybe I was. Maybe I was just lonely. But then the coldness became routine. One night, after he'd stormed out during an argument, Max climbed onto the couch beside me and refused to leave. I remember gripping his fur, crying so hard I couldn't breathe. I think he knew. Dogs don't need explanations. They just stay. What hurt most wasn't the silence or the lies. It was the absence of effort. Mark didn't fight for us. He didn't ask why I cried in the bathroom. He didn't notice the untouched dinners or the wilted flowers. I tried. God, I tried. Therapy. Date nights. Apologies for things I hadn't even done. I wanted to save something he already let go of. And still I waited. Then came the late-night voicemail. He'd forgotten to hang up, too busy laughing with someone else. A woman. Her voice was soft, flirty, and too familiar. I played it 3 times, hoping I was wrong. Hoping it was work, a joke. But her, "I miss you already," shattered whatever doubt I had left. I didn't scream. I didn't cry right away. I just sat there, Max's head in my lap, and pressed delete. Not out of denial, but because I already knew. That was the night something inside me changed. Max looked up at me like he understood. He didn't bark or move. He just stayed. Steady. Quiet. Present. From that moment, I stopped waiting. I stopped checking the time or fixing my hair before he walked in. I started seeing the truth in every gesture, every sigh. The love I thought we had was a memory, a photograph I'd been clinging to long after it had faded. Mark came home later and later. Some nights, not at all. And I didn't ask. I stopped needing to hear his lies. I had Max. I had the silence, and somehow, it felt safer than hope. People say divorce starts with papers, but I think it starts with distance. A slow unraveling. 1,000 little moments when you realize the person beside you stopped seeing you a long time ago. And still, Max stayed. Always beside me. Always ready. When the world felt like it was falling apart, he was the one thing that didn't. Even when everything else did. I couldn't keep pretending. After hearing that voicemail, I started noticing every lie for what it was. Mark wasn't hiding it well anymore. The distance between us wasn't just emotional, it was physical, unmistakable. He stopped coming home altogether some nights. He had excuses, of course. Meetings, clients, traffic. I stopped reacting. I stopped asking. He mistook my silence for acceptance, but I was watching, listening, preparing. I went through his phone one morning after he left it charging on the nightstand. He never used to guard it, but lately it had become glued to him. That morning he forgot. I didn't feel guilty. I needed to know. There they were, messages, photos, call logs. Her name was Rachel. The coworker he swore was just on the team. The messages were intimate. Long threads of conversations I hadn't had with him in years. Compliments. Plans. Inside jokes. I wasn't angry. Not yet. I was numb. Detached. I screenshotted everything and emailed it to myself. Not because I planned to use it for revenge, but because I needed proof that I wasn't crazy. That my instincts weren't lying. I sat with Max for hours afterward, staring out the window. He stayed curled by my feet, like always. The betrayal didn't sting the way I thought it would. It was more like relief. The confusion, the self-doubt. All of it finally made sense. When Mark got home that night, I didn't scream. I asked him if there was anything he wanted to tell me. He said no. Looked me in the eye. Lied without flinching. I told him I'd seen the messages. His expression didn't change. No guilt. No panic. Just indifference. Like he'd been waiting for this to come out. He sat down, sighed, and said, "It hasn't been working for a long time." That was it. No apology. No explanation. Just a calm acceptance of the wreckage he created. I asked him how long it had been going on. He said, "Does it matter?" I asked if he loved her. He shrugged. Said she made him feel alive again. I stood there, shaking. Not from rage, but from disbelief that someone could be so detached from the pain they caused. He told me he wanted a divorce. That he'd already spoken to a lawyer. He had made plans. Moved on. While I was crying myself to sleep, he was building a new life. Max growled when Mark raised his voice. It was quiet but unmistakable. Mark told him to shut up. That moment broke something in me. Max had been our dog, but he was mine now. He knew who had stayed, who had shown up every day. After Mark left that night, I sat in the living room with the documents he'd given me. Drafted divorce papers. Efficient. Cold. It felt like reading an obituary for a marriage I'd spent years trying to save. I didn't cry. I didn't break things. I just felt hollow. The days that followed were mechanical. Phone calls. Meetings with lawyers. Sorting through possessions. Deciding who got what. Mark wanted the car, the stocks, the apartment. I let him have almost everything. I only made one demand. Max stays with me. He didn't argue. Said he didn't have time for a dog anyway. That told me everything. Friends started choosing sides. Some reached out, surprised. Others fell silent, awkward. I didn't blame them. People don't know how to deal with the aftermath of infidelity. They whisper. They speculate. But no one really understands what it's like unless they've been through it. I stopped answering calls. I didn't need sympathy. I needed space. Nights were the worst. The silence felt heavier. I'd wake up reaching for someone who wasn't there. I'd hear a song or smell something familiar and feel like I couldn't breathe. But Max was always there. His weight beside me. His eyes watching mine. His quiet, steady presence became the only thing I trusted. I remember one night, I collapsed on the floor, holding Max like a lifeline. The grief came in waves, rage, sorrow, shame. I wasn't just mourning Mark. I was mourning the version of myself that had believed in us. The woman who thought love was enough. Max didn't move. He let me fall apart and didn't try to fix it. That was enough. I started seeing glimpses of the woman I used to be. Not the wife. Just me. I stopped pretending. I stopped shrinking. I stopped making excuses for why I stayed so long. The truth was simple. I loved someone who stopped loving me back. That wasn't weakness. That was human. I filed the signed papers a week later. It felt like cutting a cord to a life that no longer fit. Mark didn't show up to the meeting. He had his lawyer handle it. He didn't even call. I walked out of that office free and furious. Not at him. At myself for giving so much to someone who didn't know what to do with it. But even then, I didn't regret Max. He had seen every part of me, happy, broken, silent, and never once wavered. He followed me from room to room like he was worried I might vanish. He made me feel visible when the man I married made me feel invisible. Weeks passed. I deleted Mark's number, blocked Rachel, packed up the last of the boxes. I found pictures from our honeymoon and tore them in half. Not out of bitterness, but closure. That chapter was over. I wasn't trying to erase the past. I was just finally ready to stop living in it. Max, and I took longer walks. I started talking to him more. Not just about what happened, but about what I wanted next. I didn't have all the answers. I didn't know who I was without Mark. But I knew I wasn't going back. The final insult came in the form of a message. Mark texted me weeks later, casual, like nothing had happened. Hope you're okay. I stared at it for a minute before deleting it. I owed him nothing. Not my time. Not my pain. Not even a reply. Max was watching me again. His head tilted like he understood. Maybe he did. The woman who begged, who waited, who wept for love that wasn't returned, she was gone. I buried her with every lie, every silent night, every betrayal. In her place stood someone raw, but real. And she had Max. That was enough. For now. The silence after the divorce was loud. Not the kind that screamed, but the kind that settled in deep and stayed. I moved into a smaller place, cheaper, quieter, far from anything that reminded me of Mark. No framed memories. No familiar smells. Just white walls, unopened boxes, and Max. He adjusted quicker than I did. His tail still wagged. He still waited by the door when I went out. He still followed me around like nothing had changed, even when everything had. I got a job at a local art supply shop. Nothing glamorous, but it paid the bills and kept my mind busy. I needed something simple, predictable. The owner was kind, didn't ask too many questions. I liked that. Most days I'd come home exhausted, not from the work, but from pretending I was fine. Max was the only one I didn't have to lie to. He never needed explanations, never offered pity. Just quiet company. That meant more than anything. I didn't talk about Mark. Not at work. Not with the few friends I still had. What was there to say? I'd been replaced. Discarded. And now I was learning how to exist again, without a shadow behind me. There was no grand plan. Just small routines. Coffee in the morning. Walks in the evening. Breathing through it one day at a time. One evening at the dog park, Max wandered toward a man sitting alone. I called for him, but he ignored me. Unusual for him. The man scratched behind Max's ears like they were old friends. I apologized as I walked over. He smiled, said it was fine, told me he used to have a dog just like him. There was something easy about him. He didn't pry, didn't flirt, just asked Max's name and told me his Ethan. After that, we saw each other often. Same time. Same bench. He brought treats for Max, talked to him more than he talked to me. I liked that. It felt safe. He never asked personal questions. He didn't try to insert himself into my life. He just showed up like Max always did. Over time, the silence between us turned comfortable. He'd share little things, funny stories, books he was reading, songs he liked. I listened. Sometimes I responded. Sometimes I didn't. He never pushed. He just let things be. One evening, he offered me coffee from his thermos. I took it. That felt bigger than it should have. I found myself looking forward to our conversations. Not because I wanted anything from him, but because he didn't expect anything from me. That was rare. After Mark, I didn't trust easily. I didn't want to open doors I had finally closed. But Ethan didn't knock, he just waited. Patiently. Max adored him. He'd perk up at the sight of him, pull at the leash until we got close. One night, Ethan said, "He's a good judge of character." I smiled. It felt strange, using those muscles again. But it didn't hurt. That was new. At home, I started noticing small changes in myself. I was sleeping better, laughing at things again, cooking, not just eating to survive. Music played in the background. I caught myself humming. I caught myself feeling. I didn't tell Ethan about Mark. Not for a long time. One day, as we sat watching Max chase leaves, he asked if I'd ever been married. I said yes. That was it. He nodded and didn't press. Later, I told him more. About the cheating, the silence, the betrayal. He didn't pity me. He just listened. That meant everything. He told me about his past too. A long-term relationship that ended badly. Different reasons. Same kind of damage. Maybe that's why we understood each other. Two people who had been broken in similar ways, just trying to stand again. We started meeting outside the park. Lunch. Coffee. A bookstore once. It was never planned, never forced. Just natural. Easy. He never made grand gestures. He just showed up. And kept showing up. It was unfamiliar but comforting. One rainy afternoon, he helped me carry groceries to my car. I invited him in for coffee. We sat at the kitchen table while Max snoozed by our feet. We talked about nothing and everything. Hours passed like minutes. When he left, he didn't try to kiss me. Just smiled and said, "Same time tomorrow?" After he left, I stood by the window for a long time. I wasn't in love. Not yet. But I was healing. That was bigger. I started painting again. Not for anyone. Not to sell. Just for me. The colors felt less heavy. The lines more fluid. I felt like I was taking pieces of myself back. Not all at once, but piece by piece. Every morning I woke up, I felt a little less hollow. Mark sent a message once. Just a single line. "Hope you're well." I didn't respond. There was nothing left to say. His chapter in my life was over. Ethan wasn't a replacement. He was something else entirely. A reminder that not everyone leaves. That not every ending means you stop beginning. One night, Ethan asked if I ever thought about starting over. I said I didn't know. He said, "That's okay. I'm not going anywhere." I believed him. There was no dramatic love confession. No whirlwind romance. Just two people finding comfort in the quiet. I didn't need fireworks. I needed presence. Consistency. Kindness. And that's what he gave. Max laid between us one evening as we watched the sky fade into night. I realized I hadn't thought about Mark in days. Not with pain. Not with anger. Just indifference. That's when I knew I was healing. I wasn't the same woman who begged someone to stay. I wasn't the same woman who searched for meaning in someone else's absence. I was building something new. Slowly. Carefully. And this time, I wasn't doing it alone. Max had been there through every low, every doubt, every silent scream. He was more than just a pet. He was the one who kept me standing long enough to find my footing again. And now I was learning how to walk forward. One step at a time. The day I realized I was truly free didn't look any different than the others. There was no moment of triumph, no grand revelation. It was quiet, simple. I was folding laundry, and for the first time in what felt like forever, my mind wasn't somewhere else. It wasn't circling old conversations or wondering how things could have gone differently. It was just here. And that was enough. The pain had faded, not disappeared, but dulled into something distant. Something I didn't need to carry every day. I didn't wake up with that pit in my stomach anymore. I didn't flinch when I saw couples holding hands. I didn't check Mark's social media. I had nothing left to prove. Not to him. Not to myself. I survived it. That was the win. Max had gotten older. A little slower. His face had grayed around the muzzle, and his naps stretched longer, but he was still my shadow. Still followed me from room to room, still pressed his weight against me when I needed grounding. I'd look at him and remember the nights he stayed awake with me when I couldn't stop crying, how he never looked away, never judged. I owed more to him than I ever could to most people. He never gave up on me when I had nothing left to give. Ethan was still around, too. Always steady, never demanding. Our relationship grew not from intensity, but from a foundation of patience and respect. There was no pressure to define it, no need to label every feeling. He let me come to him on my own terms. He didn't try to erase my past, he simply gave me space to build something new, something real. And I did. There were moments that still caught me off guard. A scent, a song, a memory that floated in without warning. But they didn't hurt like they used to. They just reminded me of how far I'd come. That woman who had once felt so small, so invisible, was gone. I had been broken, but I'd put myself back together in a way that no longer resembled who I used to be. Stronger, quieter, wiser. I started writing again. Not for an audience, just for me. It helped put things in perspective, to see the mess on paper, to realize it didn't control me anymore. I wrote about the grief, the betrayal, the unexpected love. And Max, always Max. Every story I told, he was there in the background, unwavering. One afternoon, while reading in the park, I saw Mark. Just a glimpse, him across the walkway with someone else. Not Rachel. Someone new. He didn't see me, and I didn't want him to. I watched him laugh, the way he used to with me. But I felt nothing. No jealousy. No regret. Just relief. He was no longer the villain in my story. He was just a chapter one had closed. Later that night, Ethan asked me what I would say to Mark if I ever spoke to him again. I thought about it. Then I said, nothing. Because I didn't need closure. I didn't need an apology. I didn't want anything from him anymore. The power he once had over me was gone. I had taken it back piece by piece, and I had no intention of giving it away again. People talk about moving on like it's a destination. But it isn't. It's not about forgetting. It's about remembering without falling apart. It's about building a life where the past is just that, past. Not something you carry, but something you learn from. Max had taught me more about love than most humans ever could. His loyalty, his quiet strength, his ability to stay no matter what. When I doubted myself, when I hated myself, when I thought I'd never be whole again, he stayed. That kind of love doesn't get talked about enough. But it saved me. I didn't need a fairy tale ending. I didn't need grand gestures or perfect closure. I just needed to come back to myself. To find peace in the ordinary. To laugh again, even if it took time. And I had. There were still hard days. But they didn't define me anymore. They came and went like waves, but I'd learned how to stand through them. To breathe through them. To wait them out. That was healing. Ethan and I talked about moving in together once. I told him I wasn't ready. He didn't flinch. He just said, whenever you are. No deadlines. No ultimatums. Just understanding. That's how I knew it was real. Love without pressure. Love without fear. I looked around one evening. Books stacked on the table, unfinished art on the easel, Max asleep on the rug, the soft hum of music playing in the background, and I realized I wasn't waiting for anything anymore. I wasn't waiting for someone to love me right. I wasn't waiting for the pain to pass. I wasn't waiting for life to start. It had already started. What Mark gave up, what he couldn't see, wasn't my loss. It was his. He left behind something he didn't know how to value. I spent months thinking I wasn't enough, when the truth was, I was too much for someone who was never ready to hold anything real. Now I knew better. I knew what I deserved. I knew how to protect my peace. I knew how to let go of what hurt, even when it once felt like everything. And I knew that healing doesn't mean you're never sad again. It just means the sadness doesn't control you. Max stirred in his sleep and looked at me. That old, knowing gaze. I scratched behind his ears and whispered, we did it. Because we had. We survived. We rebuilt. We became something stronger, together. He was more than just a pet. He was my witness, my anchor, my constant. Through betrayal, through heartbreak, through the slow, messy, beautiful process of starting over. And he never once left my side. I didn't need a perfect ending. I had peace. I had love. I had myself. And that was everything.